I want to introduce John Willson. He is the Executive Director of SOAR, and he is President of North Carolina Learning Disabilities Association for a little bit longer. And I want to let him tell you more about
Okay. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for the invitation, and I appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to share some interesting insights that we've discovered along the way, specifically serving kids diagnosed with learning disabilities and ADHD. As she indicated, I'm the current president of the Learning Disability Association of North Carolina for maybe another week, a title which I've had for too many years, about 10, 11. And so we finally have a new president-elect. I'm also on the national board of CH.A.D.D and part of that executive committee, and I've really devoted my life to serving this population of children. In addition to that, I'm the executive director of SOAR, which is a high-adventure summer camp and school that specifically works with the population that we're talking about, kids with learning disabilities and ADHD. And Joanne asked me to come today and give a workshop on positive strategies that parents and professionals can use to garner development and healthy growth for their kids, but also to share with you a little bit of the power of the outdoor experience and how it pertains to nurturing, nurturing the human spirit. A little bit more about me. I am an adult diagnosed with ADHD. When I was in the 5th grade, I was diagnosed with something called attention deficiency syndrome with hyperkinesis, which really all that meant was that when my mom would try and find me, she would routinely check the roof of the house. At which I had, because there's no telling, I would be up there ready to leap off the house and down this wonderful tree, where I would skate down the boughs of the tree and then land into a tuck and a roll. It was really quite spectacular. The way my ADHD manifests itself is, I'm still a little impulsive. And a few years ago at home, I was looking at the tree, and my brother dared me to do my exit. I was much smaller and more limber at the time, and so not to, but before my little don't do that governor that we all have, we've got the do that governor and the don't do that governor. Well, the don't do that governor was strangely quiet as I ascended to the top of the roof, did the running jump, leapt down, tuck and roll, only instead of coming up fresh eyes and ready to go, I had to lay there for a while and make sure that all my parts were still intact. It's a lesson I won't have to learn a second time. Much to my mother's great dismay, all of the sports that I enjoy require the use of a helmet. And so I am action-oriented, driven to experience kind of the thrill of life. And I credit that in no small part to the fact that I am a person who has learned to embrace what my ADHD has in life. One final story that will kind of bring this home for you. I'm in the 6th, 7th grade, and I'm on a soccer team called the Missiles, and we were part of the Spring Valley Athletic Association, and we were very, very good. In fact, we won our division every year. And I was, a little heavy, not real coordinated, on a really good soccer team. So since everybody has to get playing time, where do you put that kid on the field on a really good soccer team? The goal. Yeah. And the challenge, me being the goalie, although I eventually did become a good goalie, but the challenge with me being in the goal is because I'm on a really good soccer team, all the action is happening where? I mean, I'd rather be watching from the sidelines, to be honest, because I can hardly see what's happening. And to make matters worse, we had a fullback nicknamed The Foot. And Jack could kick the ball a mile. And so the ball wasn't ever going to even come anywhere close to me. And on this particular game, we were winning 10-11 to nothing. Coach put me in. He's delighted because everyone's getting playing time. You know, the ball doesn't cross the midline, you know, once while I'm in there. And so now I'm stuck, bored, with attention deficit disorder, trying to figure out how to entertain myself. So I start looking around. Well, all I had was me, the soccer post, and the orange soccer net. So I thought, okay, what if I could figure out a way to touch the bottom of my cleats to the top of this orange soccer net? So I start working that out, trying different strategies, and eventually I managed to, I'm not even sure how, but turn myself upside down, kick my legs out, and I, in fact, did accomplish my goal. The challenge was that as I started to come down, my feet were tangled in the orange soccer net. Now, most of you know this is not going to end well for me, don't you? All right, so the more I flailed my feet, the worse it got. Until eventually, my strength gave out and I had to let go of that post. Well, we're in the Science Museum. When something moves one direction, what has to happen? It comes back, and my head collided with the post, knocking me unconscious. There's no telling how long I dangled there until the opposing coach, for some reason, looked and comes running onto the field to stop the game because the opposing goalie is dangling unconscious upside down from the soccer net, and no one has any idea why. So is it any wonder that I've suffered many concussions in my life, but that I would then, you know, eventually grow up to work with kids just like me? I have two beautiful children. Both of them are dealing with attentional issues. One of them was in special services and was diagnosed with a learning disability. And, you know, through a lot of extra hard work, tutors, going through a really difficult time trying to find what was the right medication regimen, we now have a student who was held back in the first grade, who could not read a lick at the end of his first grade year. He's now in the 7th grade, and he is the second student in honors English to reach the 3 million word mark. He's the top reader in his school. All right, and so it can happen, it can be done. But it takes a tremendous amount of energy and effort and support and services and guidance from all of you to help our kids be the best that they can be. So with that, let's get started, and I want to share something with you. All right, imagine for a second that this glass represents a child with a learning disability or ADHD, okay? How many of you are half full people? Believe this is half full? Raise your hand. All right, how many of you are like, yeah, it's half empty? All right, you would say you're a realist, and you know, we need realists. All right, but what would you say is your job now as it pertains to this child? Fill it up. All right, fill it up. Anybody else? See, here's the problem with that philosophy, and I appreciate that, because I need somebody to say that so I can say this. You don't have the power to fill this up. You don't. You know, you don't have the power to fill this up. None of us do. But what you have the power to do is you have the power to celebrate the things that made this what it is. And when you create that wraparound opportunities, when you start celebrating all the remarkable things that go into making this what it is, then it begins to fill on its own. Change is a hard thing to do, isn't it? It's so difficult for all of us to change. It requires hard work. It requires effort. It doesn't come easy. But that's why it's so significant when it does occur. And when we create a platform and environment that allow kids to change, that allow kids to grow, and that growth comes from within, it's so much more impactful and powerful than if we just try and fill it up with fluff. We have to celebrate what really makes us remarkable, these kids remarkable, so they start seeing themselves based on their gifts and their strengths and their abilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, because my life's endeavor has been to create opportunities that allow kids to be successful and allow them to see themselves based on the remarkable gifts that they bring and that they possess. Are you with me? Okay, well, let's talk about areas for potential growth. All right? Certainly, are you seeing that in areas that some of these kids are challenged with self-esteem, power and control, organizational skills. Are they super sensitive? Yeah. You know, I know that that for me, you know, if someone patted me on the back or touched me too hard, it would feel like a hit, versus somebody just, you know, giving me a touch on the back, giving me an attaboy. And I would tend to do what? Overreact, right? All right, so we see a lot of, you know, that kind of challenges with our kids. Social skills. Our kids sometimes really struggle socially with other kids. You know, how about I need a volunteer. Anybody? Will you be my volunteer? Come on up. Come on. What's your name?
Alex.
Alex, you've been voluntold. Okay. So I move into my house in Dallas, and Alan is the very first person I meet. And what would be an appropriate way for me to introduce myself to Alan? Hey, Alan, I'm John. You know, I'm from Dallas. How are you doing? But what do I do? You know, I get all up in him and I touch him. I'm like, hey, we're gonna be best friends. How you doing? I'm so glad to know you. And I'm all up in his face. And Alan does that. So what do I now do? Do I read that social cue? Do I know that Alan just stepped back? No. What do? I step forward and I continue my onslaught. And it gets worse. See, I was from Santiago, Chile. That's where I was born and raised until I was 6. So I've just met Alan. And in Chile, what do? An embrace and a kiss on either cheek. Alan has no idea what he's in for, right?
I'm volunteering.
He's just volunteered himself right out of the room. Now, to Alan's credit, and your name was Larry, by the way.
Alex.
To Alex's credit, you know, that gentleman who I just, you know, threw myself at, you know, ended up being a very close and dear friend. But he had to weather the storm that was my inability to read social cues and deal with, you know, how people interrelate. Decision making. Thumbs up? Yeah. What he said. Our ability to manage frustration, you know. I mean, we go from 0 to nothing, just like that. Compliant behavior. Many of us are not particularly easygoing. We're strong-willed, aren't we? And the more strong-willed we are, the more difficult we are, and we have to take the world on our own terms. And so you start to paint this picture of all of these sort of areas of challenge that make it difficult. So we need to find and discover opportunities to help these kids grow. And these are real things. You know, these are you're here today because you're dealing with some of these things on this list, aren't you? All right, so just a quick question for you guys. How many of you are here because you are parents with a child that I'm describing right now? Raise your hand, please. Most of the room. How many of you are here because you are a professional, either a teacher or a therapist or in some capacity because you're working with this population of kids? Okay? All right. Is there another reason you're here? Anybody? Okay. All right. So we're trying to discover those opportunities. So how do we start? Well, I've got good news. I've got 2 pieces of really great news. The first piece of good news is that there's a map. There's a way to get there from here. There are things that we can do, that we now have learned, that can help kind of guide you in the right direction to help you raise a child that is resilient, that can take on the difficulties of adulthood. And I'm gonna talk about some of those studies today, and we're gonna go through that. The second piece of good news I have for you is that there is a better than average chance that your children, the ones that you're raising or the ones that you're working with, are going to be okay. Do you know why? Anybody?
Yes, because we're here.
Because you're here. Because you are here. And I don't mean that in a way to say I've got the answers, but you're searching. You're looking. You are not satisfied with the way things are. You are looking and searching for ways to improve, and that is a significant opportunity. So where do we start? Well, we start where scientists start. We start with an assessment. We start looking at these kids. And what's the very first word you see in my assessment? Strengths. It's always, always, always going to be strengths. And do you know why I start with strengths? It's a simple little fact. Which is more difficult? To fix something that's wrong, or to take something that's right and accentuate it in different areas? Which of those is easier? Accentuate the positive. To try and take the things that are working and grow them so that they eventually might encompass some of the things that aren't working. And so let's find out specifically what's right about these kids. Where's their expertise? What are their abilities? Now, once I have that platform, and on SOAR's application, that's the first question we ask. What are your child's strengths? So the next question is areas that they need to be developed. These are the opportunities. Let's face it, these are why you're here. You're looking for ways to develop. So, but I would encourage you to keep that list really short. All right, if you had an index card and you had a big piece of paper, a poster board, and you're going to list all of your kids' challenges, and then you're going to list all of your kids' abilities and strengths. Which one is going on which? Now, you know what the right answer should be, don't you? You know that you want to keep on the index card the list of things that you're trying to fix. And on the big poster board, all the lists of gifts and strengths and abilities and accomplishments. But sometimes we get so caught up in the difficulty of parenting that it ends up being the other way around. And that is a mindset and a mind shift that I would encourage you to really examine and take a look at. Because when you keep your goals focused and narrowed on just a couple of things, are you more successful or less successful than if you've got a list of 20 things to accomplish? You know the answer to that question. All right? I think the list can change. You get an accomplishment, you move on to the next thing. And then you've got to ask yourself what is currently working, but even more importantly, what is not working. Now, this is the best advice I'm going to give you today. Think of one thing that you are currently doing that isn't working. Go ahead. Just think about one strategy that you are employing with your children or with a child that you really think about, that is not working. All right, have you got one? All right, you ready? This is going to be a mind blower. Stop doing that. It's not working. All right, so we're going to create the agreement. And when you get buy-in from a child, that's so much more powerful than you deciding, okay, we're going to do things differently. So, but you have to go into that process after you've done this sort of assessment. What are the things that you absolutely have to have? At the Willson household, it's very, very small. One is respect for each other. Angry hands are not allowed. And if you are frustrated, then you've got to find a way to communicate that in a way that is not disrespectful. That's the burden of being a Willson. Those are our non-negotiables. Encourage input and feedback from your children as you're kind of working through this process. Choose the issues you really want to target. Define expectations and potential outcomes. It used to be that we could, that we could just lay out a plan and expect you to follow that plan, but we know that's not true. We know that people are going to be invested if there's a reason and a rationale for what's in it for them. Yeah? If they figure out what's in it for them, then that can be really critically important. At SOAR, and again, I didn't tell you really what SOAR was. We have a base camp about 2 hours from here, and we're a high adventure summer camp, and then we also have a residential school. But at SOAR, when the kids come together, one of the first things that they do is they figure out what they want the rules of the group to be. we've only got a couple non-negotiables. All right, and you'd be surprised what our non-negotiables are. Non-negotiable number 1. Unless you're in the tent or the bathroom, you have to wear shoes. All right, why do you suppose that is? You can't really be adventurous when you've got a cut on the bottom of your foot. All right, rule number 2. If you put somebody down, then you owe them 3 put-ups. And we do that in our family. If you put somebody down, you owe them 3 put-ups. And the way I've transferred that to my family is when my kids start bickering, I say, okay, stop, we're going to play the my favorite thing about you game. And then we go around and, we each say our favorite thing about everybody, and then we might do a round 2 or a round 3. Our third non-negotiable is that if I am talking and giving you instruction, I will not continue to do so unless I have everybody's undivided attention. And the fourth rule is I want everyone to have fun. That's it. Those are my basic frameworks. There's a lot of layers in that. But ultimately, now I'm going to ask you, what do you want the rules to be? And the kids are going to say things like, no profanity. You can't touch my stuff. You can't touch me. And they create the agreement. Do they have buy-in or not? If they're the architect of the agreement, they've got lots more buy-in. We negotiate what that's going to look like, and then we figure out, okay, these are the things that we want to fix, these are the things that we want to change, these are the things that we want to keep, these are the areas that we want to continue to nurture. What if those change? How do we get back together and figure out a way to keep growing this list of things that I'm good at and things that I need help with?